It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. And joining us now, a man who's having the month of his life. He just got married, had a phenomenal looking honeymoon, at least based off Instagram. Then he came back, had a birthday, and his favorite team was sold away from a terrible person to someone who seems to know what they're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, from ESPN New York and Hot 97, DC's own Peter Rosenberg. Rosenberg, what's up, man?
Craig, how are you? This is, you know what? When you frame it that way, this has been a hell of a month. You're right. This is pretty damn good.
I shouldn't speak out of turn. I shouldn't put on you that this is the month of your life, but it's definitely a good month.
It's up there. It's up there. The wedding alone that day was so awesome that probably would have clinched the month. But then, getting this news also finally, sort of after drips and drabs over the last few months, we finally got the news. It's pretty fantastic.
For sure. And you joined us the day, I don't know, it's like one of the days that it became kind of more official. On one of those days, you joined us at a commercial break from the Michael Kay show.
Yes.
But now, when the news finally hits, and it's like, okay, the ink's dry, like the agreement's done, the vote has happened. How did that particular moment hit you?
I mean, at that point, I'd gotten to really confident it was going to get done, even after the week before when there was like that slight hiccup and a little bit of concern there could be something or other. I still was I've been confident for a while it was going to happen. It's hard to pinpoint, like now looking back over all the stories over the last 3 years of like when it was getting more real. But I do remember at several points starting to say like, I think this is trending the right way. And I remember saying at one point, to either to JP Finley or on the K show or both, the Washington Post isn't stopping. Like I am a big believer in the power of good media, and when journalists want to do something for the people, doing the right thing. And I really feel that the Washington Post for a long time, it sounds negative if you use the terminology, had an axe to grind. They did, though. They had an axe to grind on behalf of the public of the Washington, D.C. area that really wanted the truth to come out about this team. And the one thing I noticed was no matter what happened, like a month or two would pass, and then like you'd see another story pop up. And I'm like, oh, people are just... And by the way, the Post may just be the outlet for whoever really did have the axe to grind. But someone out there with more power than you or me was not going to stop until everything got out there. And I'm sure there was still more in the chamber that didn't get out. But this this was enough, though. And so I started to believe in the last like year and a half, 2 years, just doesn't seem like they're going to stop till it happens. So I'm thrilled. When I think about the season, I get really excited. It's kind of like, it's a little bit hard to even picture. I mean, this has been my entire adult life, dude. Like I just turned 44 a couple days ago. And so this takes me back to literally I was in college, like at Maryland when this team got sold. And really the glory sort of ended when I got out of high school and heading into college. So my entire adult life, when I've been like, I'm as passionate about them now as I've ever been. I really think it's like grown for me as I got further and further away from the glory years. And yet it always had this asterisk of, I love this team more than any other team. But when I meet someone and they go, oh, who's your team? I always had to sort of like bite my mouth down a little bit and say like, Washington. And whether it was the name for a while when that became a huge thing, but really all of it, including the name, in my opinion, all had to do with Snyder. I know this is potentially controversial to say, even with everything that's happened in the world, I don't know that the name thing even happens the way it does, if not for the vitriol against Dan Snyder. So it really, to me, all comes back to Dan Snyder. I'll never forget the day. And by the way, I was in favor of them changing the name for a long time prior to it becoming a big story. But that being said, it was that moment when he said, you can put it in all caps, we will never change the name. Again, he would make, he would alienate people in such a horrible way that it's hard to even measure the level of impact that his negativity had on this franchise, fan base, etc.
No doubt. And I think that's an interesting point. Like I think both things can be true. I think it ultimately would have changed because of all of the things, the society that we live in, but also the way it all goes down is unique to him. Which then brings us to the new guy, your Chevy Chase brethren, in Josh Harris. What are your early impressions of him from the event on Friday and his early comments? Both he, Magic, Mitchell Rales, everybody that spoke on Friday.
I mean, listen, everyone's saying the right things and looks to be the right people. I know very little about them, except kind of the basic bio stuff everybody knows. I've asked around here to, Sixer fans and Devil fans their feelings, and generally people feel pretty good about where their teams have gone under his ownership. So, yeah, man, I mean, this was more an example of like, just don't give us someone with a glaring baggage. You know what I mean? Like, just don't give me Elon Musk. Like, don't give me someone who comes with a whole lot of other outside the business stuff. Because, I mean, let's be honest, bro. What can I possibly understand about a person this rich? We don't operate or understand people like that. I'm not in rooms like that. I couldn't even purport to understand what these people are like. But I do know that he's from Chevy Chase. I do know that he's a lifelong fan. I do know that he's a part of other organizations that he has not run into the ground. And to me, those are all things that I'm willing to say, let's give it a shot.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think struck me is like, I don't pretend that Josh Harris is completely in touch with like people who operate at you and I's level in terms of the way we roll through the world as human beings who can't buy our way through whatever doors we want to open. But he did seem very actually human. And after 25 years or 24 years of Snyder being as disconnected as any human I can possibly remember in terms of the sports world, that to me was extremely refreshing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been in New York now. I've been, most importantly, doing ESPN New York now for like 7 years. And I've had, in those 7 years, personally, multiple interactions with John Mara, right? I wonder if people in my shoes in D.C. over 25 years had multiple interactions with Dan Snyder. They just don't. Like, John Mara will come out when we're at camp and say hello to us, do interviews with us in person, and then also just be a friendly, or if there's a really, I remember a few years ago when there was a big will Eli go, what happened, blah, blah, blah. Mara called the show and like talks like a human being. Like he it's not every day, but it's not like he's some crazed wizard hiding in a tower, And
no, you have James Dolan for that there.
Exactly. Dolan would be our closest that you get, and even Dolan, who's the worst.
Terrible.
To me, he still pales to Snyder. Like, he will again at least show up and talk. Not often, and he does a horrifying job. But there's two things that I'd give Dolan over Snyder. They're both petty, petulant, insecure, make the wrong decisions, alienate people because of their pettiness. Like, they have a lot in common. But one, Dolan owns two franchises, and one of them is at least a pretty competent franchise in the Rangers. Like, they're not an embarrassment. They haven't won in 25 years a Stanley Cup, but they've been there, and they're relevant, and the building's full. Neither team did he completely erode the fan base. Now, granted, MSG is a bit different than FedEx Field, but regardless, I mean, one of the crazy things that we almost like took for granted about the Snyder tenure and how awful it's been is that the building's empty. Like, I almost like watch the games and it never stops blowing my mind. You might only see it once or twice. You'll see it at the top of the game because you're at games more in person, obviously, than I am. Most of mine are just watching the national broadcast at home. So you'll see the game, you'll see the stadium at the beginning, and then maybe coming out of the half. And if I'm ever with anyone else, I always like tap them and I go, do you see this? NFL buildings don't look like this. You could be the worst team in the world, let alone a team that when I was a kid, getting tickets to a Redskin game as a child was it wasn't a thing. And if it happened, it was like, oh my God, I got tickets. I'm canceling everything I could possibly have on my calendar to go to this game. Where are the seats? I don't know. I'm just going to be there. And to now look up and you're like, man, it's literally, and remembering, of course, that they added the stupid FedEx colored plastic to block out 10,000 seats.
Oh,
and
it's more than that. It's like 30,000.
Yeah, it's still empty. I just, to me, that was always like almost overlooked. And I'm like, how is the NFL, a place that is as greedy and money hungry as anywhere on earth, how are they good with this? With this really historic franchise with multiple championships? It's wild.
Yeah, and it's a question that I've asked a lot. Don Van Natta and I talked about that quite a bit. There's no good answer. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey at Peter Rosenberg is with us. All right, let's play like a little bit of Commanders or Washington franchise bingo here. Hit all the spots. One. Name change. We talked about the old name. I think we agree that's not on the table.
That's not on the table.
Yeah. There are. Look, you'd be surprised in people who think it is.
And I'd like to say one thing, just to clarify what I said earlier. I do believe it likely would have changed. However, if you were dealing with someone who wasn't a maniacal jerk and someone who was thoughtful and understood the negative attachment people would have to that word and was remotely capable of being any sort of politician, I believe there probably could have been political gamesmanship and relationships formed that could have at least staved that conversation off for a long time. The right donations, the right community support, the right alliances, not being a complete jerk. I think you could have probably seen all of a sudden people coming out for defense of that name that you'd be like, wow, I'm surprised to hear someone say that. But he's not savvy or capable or has any way to do anything except beating it with a hammer over and over again. So, but no, to answer we are not going back there. So the question is, where do we go from here?
Right. Is there any particular name that, one, do you think that they, I don't know, need's a strong word, but like level of need, percent 0 to 100, 0, they don't need to change it. Just everyone needs to get over it, move on. 100%, they have to do it. Where is the level of need to change the name? And is there any name in particular that you think is actually good?
Okay, I put the need at very low. Like in terms of like need, like it's something I actually think about, very low. I mean, and by the way, I was not a huge Commanders fan by name. You know, when it happened, I certainly wasn't like, oh my God, yes. I thought, I did not think that, but I just thought, oh yeah, it's obligatorily sort of has a military connection. It's hitting the touch points for the kind of things that they do. Doesn't surprise me. A year into it, I find it to be very non-offensive. Like, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not someone who sits there miserable over it at all. I frankly think, like, they could have been more clever with the designs, and I think that would have probably gone a long way to people not hating it so much. Because I guess I'm just confused about what people think. Let me say this. So the need, I'll answer, is low. I don't think it's a high priority for me at all.
Yeah.
I think, though, if you're going to do it, obviously it has to happen right this second and never change again. Okay? Because you're one notch from full-on laughingstock even after all these changes if you continue to change your name. Like, that's just from a branding standpoint, that's just suicide. To me, though, if you are going to change it at this point, I think you're almost backed into a corner where the only way you can go is back to football team. Like, I think the idea of now coming up with yet another name where, like, you look in the history books and it went from Redskin, football team, Commander, fourth name in like 6 years, that to me looks like a little sad and pathetic. And real quick, is the name you're going to come up with so good and so unanimously loved that it's worth sort of the silliness of changing again? Throw one at me. I'll tell you if one I think is good. Like, but so far the ones I like, I liked Red Tails. I always liked Warriors quite a bit. I thought that would really work for multiple reasons. Are any of them going to be, though, like a unanimous slam dunk? I don't think so.
No, they're 100% not. Just I've seen enough polling. The answer and dealt with enough fans on a daily basis.
Does anyone agree though with the idea of football team, or is that like completely
a dead idea? I think
idea?
that probably is the most common one. It's like, you know what, like whether that or like you make it football club and it becomes DCFC kind of thing,
right?
Which has a very soccer European feel to it, but some people really like it. All right, real quick on the way out, actual football. What's the thing you're most excited for this season? Because you are as jazzed up for this season as you have been in a long time. What is the thing that has you jazzed?
Well, I mean, besides the obvious, the number one thing is just not going in with the guilt of knowing that my team is owned by Dan Snyder.
Right.
Losing that sort of cloak of evil is really what I'm most excited about.
Yes, emotional freedom.
But really, I mean, I think the only answer is seeing Sam Howell. Like I because everything else, really up and down, we know this team pretty well. And we sort of know what we have, which is a really strong team. Like, it's very interesting to hear the excitement here in New York around the Jets and sort of the lack of excitement nationally around the Commanders. And to me, the only difference is Aaron Rodgers, obviously, versus Sam Howell. Now, that is a huge difference. That is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time against an unknown entity completely. But I would submit that Aaron Rodgers on a new team at this age and this stage is a little bit more of an unknown entity than people are giving it credit for. Like, I don't expect this to look the same as it looked 5 years ago. I say all of that to say, wow, that is a lot when you think about the fact that this team, if the Commanders had made a play for Aaron Rodgers, where would we be getting talked about? I think people would be talking about NFC Championship conversation. They'd think this is a team that could really do something. Instead, we're basically not talked about nationally at all. Like, we're not really in the conversation in a real way. And I always am like a little annoyed by that because I find this team over the last couple of years to be really strong in multiple units. So to me, everything's about Sam Howell. I mean, do we have a quarter? Do we somehow stumble into a guy? Like, that would be amazing. In all likelihood, probably not. And we're going to end up starting over one more time. And the real test will then come for Josh Harris. What do you do with Ron Rivera? What do you do up and down with this team? And where do you go? But to me, the most exciting thing is week one. What does Sam Howell look like? Because frankly, you know, he looked nice in that game against Dallas, but how much can we really judge in one final game of the season? Like, we know nothing.
We do, which is what makes this time of year so fun. Everybody knows nothing. We all pretend like we know a lot, say a bunch of stuff, and then September rolls around and we find out who's right and wrong.
And it's all that, and it's really just because I think you would agree. We basically know what this team is outside of Howell. They're going to be a pretty solid team. They're not going to be the best in the league, but they will be good enough that if you had good quarterback play, you could be talking playoffs and doing something.
No question.
So let's see if we got a guy. Maybe we do.
Maybe. That'd be pretty funny. They stumble into a guy in year one of the Josh Harris
Wouldn't that be crazy?
24 years.
Can you imagine the hysteria of like, we found a guy and Snyder is gone? Can you imagine? Oh, my God. I know.
I have ratings bonuses that would appreciate that. Peter Rosenberg, everybody. ESPN New York, the Michael K. Show, Ebro in the morning, as well as Hot 97. Always good to chat, my friend. Appreciate you.
Thanks, dude. We'll talk down the line. Appreciate it, Craig.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.